as you just said, Lucía, it is, I think, more timely than ever probably that we have this conversation here together around the Zoom table, because these days, I guess, are marked by so many acute crises and moments in which we have this feeling that the world is falling apart in bits and pieces, and people don't understand anymore to communicate and to be and share this planet with each other. So probably it takes even more efforts of us, of the cultural sector, to contribute to that, those moments of sharing through the arts, the moments of connectivity, of understanding the other, and to keep our ongoing conversation fluid and open as possible, and as little polemic as possible. In that context, I'm very happy, together with Pearle and a long-standing partnership that we have developed in the past years, the European Festivals Association and Pearle, to offer this seminar and to have you around the table around these sustainability goals, and not only, or maybe in the backdrop, have these acute situations, but also invite us to think on a long term on our continual construction efforts and our continual efforts that we need to do to keep the conversation open and going. And in this spirit, have a keynote speech today that I'm very much looking forward to, and an expertise on the UN sustainability goals and our role in it as a cultural sector that I'm very grateful for. So thanks in advance for Pearle to facilitate and offer this seminar. Thanks in advance to all contributing to this seminar. And I wish us a very good moment of conversation, of listening, and of contribution. Over to you, Silke.
Thank you so much, Katrin, and thank you specifically for these warm, inviting words, also in the situation as we are now at the moment in Brussels. And I fully agree. We all know how important in these moments also the contribution of culture is. And I'm very, very happy to organize today with my colleagues this webinar on the Sustainable Development Goals. So thank you to all of you to be here. On behalf of Pearle, thank you specifically to EFA, to the project Revealing the Alliance. It's because of this project, actually, that we are here together and that we can offer this webinar to you. Thanks for EFA for the support and trust they have in our works, and for the good cooperation that we have in all the last years. And yeah, we would like to dive in a bit today into these UN Sustainable Development Goals. For a lot of us, it might still be a bit of an empty box, and we would like to fill it today with you with some content and also some practical examples to know how can we in the cultural sector work with these goals. And I'm very honored to welcome our expert that we have with us, Lucía Vázquez, and I apologize, I misspelled your name, Lucía, that you saw on the first slide. It's already corrected, so we will share with all participants with the right name. It's a pleasure to have you here. We already had this pleasure at our Oslo conference, actually, in May. You joined us there online. So we know that you can bring a lot of expertise to the cultural sector to us today, and introduce us to these sustainable development goals. Before I give over to my colleague Flora, I would like to say a few words about our speaker, about Lucía. So she works for the Spanish branch of the Sustainable Development Solution Network, in short SDSN. And this is an initiative of the UN Secretary General to bring together a lot of different organizations, such as universities, think tanks, but also civil society organizations, to actually implement the SDGs on the ground, and also the Paris Agreement on climate change. And how is this done? Well, through education projects, research, policy analysis, and also cooperation of different networks. So at the Spanish branch, SDSN, Lucía is a project manager in the field of culture and education, and she has been working with artistic and cultural sectors for the last 15 years, and I think around 10 years already that she's fully on the Sustainable Development Goals in connection to culture. So we are super happy to have you with us, Lucía. And I would like, before we go into conversation with you, to give the floor to my colleague, Flora, who will briefly introduce you to some practical information for this webinar. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So just to, like Silke said, some few practical information. So the format of this webinar will be a conversation between Silke and Lucía. It will be around three blocks of questions and answers. And at the end, of each block, you will be able to, we will take questions from the audiences. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat as they go. And we'll have a look at them at the end of each of these question and answers block. We'll monitor them. And if we need more input from you, we'll give you the floor to elaborate. But feel free to use the chat as much as you want. We will also post in there some useful links that Lucía mentions or that relates to Pearle and EFA publications.
Okay. Then we will just go into our conversation with Lucía. And the first part, actually, I would like to share with you my screen once more so that you have, but I don't know if you can see it now. Right.
Yeah, we can see it. Okay.
You can see it. This is the second one. Current slide. Now you should see it better. So these are the three parts so that it's clear for everyone. We will start a bit in a general way about these goals. What are they about and why are they actually relevant for the cultural sector? And in the second part, which might be the most important part for people working on the ground, actually, is how can you work with those goals in your own organization? How can you contribute to these goals? And in the third part, then we will frame a bit the political debate about what is to come in the next years, and specifically then after 2030, because as you probably know, these goals will be rediscussed as well, and there might be some opportunity for the cultural sector to contribute in a different way and maybe get some more visibility. Okay, Lucía, I would like to start with our first part. Only a few weeks ago, at the end of September, the EU cultural ministers found strong words in the Cáceres Declaration, in which they recognized culture as an essential public good and even as a global public good. So in this sense, they made a strong commitment to work for culture in the post-2030 discussions, to be recognized as a new sustainable development goal. We will discuss this part then at the end of our webinar, as I said. And now at the beginning, I wanted to first take a step back and have a bit a closer look into the sustainable development goals and understand what is it about, how can it make sense for us to work with these goals. So starting just from the basics, what do we have to know to get a better understanding?
Well, first of all, thank you very much to EFA, Flora, Audrey, Silke, Pearle, for the invitation and for the Oslo invitation also. I was supposed to be in Girona, but I couldn't because of COVID. Thank you all for being here and listening and sharing with me also all your expertise. I see some familiar faces. Jorge Fernandez Leon, who is a person who worked with us and is also an expert. So please be free to complement my intervention and let me also allow me to look at my notes from time to time, because I have everything very clear in my head in Spanish, but not that clear in English. So I need to look my notes. So I would like to just share my screen with the panel of the SDGs in case someone it's not having all the 17 SDGs in mind. Although for me, it's almost like a tattoo, being 9 years working with the SDGs. So answering your question, Silke, the SDGs are the roadmap of the 2030 agenda that 193 countries, 3 countries that make up the United Nations, agree to achieve in 2015. So that means we are at the midpoint of the SDGs. This global agenda should be finished in 2030. This is the first time, and this is important to say it, this is the first time in the history of the United Nations that all the countries agree on implementing a global agenda. Given the actual context of the world, I'm not sure this could be happen in this moment, but in 2015, it was possible. So it is a global action plan to address environmental, economic, and social crises and challenges with climate change and inequality at the forefront. So this is not only an environmental approach. Sustainable development has 3 dimensions: social, economic, and environmental, and all of them are interconnected, as the challenges that they are trying to solve are interconnected. So these 17 SDGs that you are seeing here has 169 targets and 233 indicators to measure the progress on the implementation on these SDGs. In fact, the SDSN, the network I work for, and Silke was mentioning, they publish, we publish every year a report called SDG Index that I'm going to show you here in case you want to take a look. So this is the report, and this is a report that you can also look the interactive map on how the countries are doing in the implementation of the SDGs. So for instance, if you click in one SDGs, you're going to see how the world is doing in each of them. But if you click on a country, for example, you can also see the profile, the country profile. Green means you have accomplished that SDG. Red means major challenges are remained, and orange and yellow means that challenges and significant challenges are still remaining. But although this was agreed by countries, it is important to know that without the ownership and the strong commitment of all stakeholders, including cultural agents, the 2030 agenda, it's not going to be achieved in 2030. So it is important to know that we all have a play to role. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen now.
So Lucía, you mentioned these 3 pillars already, right? The broad approach of the Sustainable Development Goals, economic, social, and environmental aspects, and you also showed the report different organizations, they can work with different goals. And would you say that there are some relevant goals, or some goals more relevant than others for the cultural sector that you would like to highlight? Yeah.
Well, we have to take into account that the goals of the 2030 agenda are all interconnected. This is the challenge of addressing the 2030 agenda, because it gives you an idea of it provides us with a holistic vision of the world challenges and solutions, because the SDGs are trying to solve these problems. So we live in a world with complex challenges and problems, and with many factors and causes, and this is what the SDGs are trying to solve. For example, I'm going to share again my screen to have a better understanding of it. If if I want to accomplish SDG 13, climate action, I cannot have that without having clear water and sanitation. Or if I want to have gender equality, I cannot have it accomplish that goal without having reduced inequality. So that means all of them need to be addressed. It is true that culture traditionally have worked some goals more than others. For example, education is something that culture has been working with for a long time, or now more gender equality or more reduced inequalities, but less other goals, less, for example, the 13, 14, and 15, all that have to do with environment. It's conceived far from culture, or far from the concept we have of culture. So this has been less worked. But or for example, SDG 9, industry innovation and infrastructure. But the important thing, I think, is for an entity or a cultural organization that wants to integrate the SDGs in their professional practice, is to first to make a diagnosis of where they are as a cultural institution in terms of the SDGs, and what they are already doing that can be linked to this global agenda. What are the goals that are more close to my vision and mission of my project, for example, or my organization? For instance, festivals seek to align more with all the environmental approach, which is festivals, and for example, film industry. They work more the environmental approach, measuring and reducing carbon footprint, working the SDG 12 that has to do with responsible consumption and production, clean energy also. But festivals can also begin, and they are doing it, to address other SDGs that, for example, has to do more with a social dimension. I would say decent work and economic growth, SDG 8, or gender equality, which more and more festivals are working, SDG 5 or SDG 10. It's more to know about what is the nature of my work, and what are the SDGs I can address from that. But above all, beyond working one specific or several SDGs, is to have this idea, is to have clear the idea that what is the role of culture in the 2030 agenda. And it has to do with creating an space where the major debates of our time can be discussed. It's about creating spaces to transform our identity as a species, who we want to be and who we are, and also to build new narratives that are close to the values of the SDGs and has to do with partnership, collaboration, peace, respect for cultural diversity, connection with nature, and so on, solidarity, and so on and so forth. So we need to have this big picture of what is the role of culture in the SDGs, and after that we can land our work and align it with some of the different SDGs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we will come back to this more practical question as well, which tools are around, and we will share later with the participants some of these tools as well, how we can start to work in a practical way with these SDGs. But I wanted to come back, first of all, to what you just said. Now we have to globally see what is the role of culture. So the question to you would be, so for you, culture already has a strong role to play in the SDGs today, because that is what is also discussed today. Is culture actually visible enough in these SDGs or in the indicators that are outlined with each goal?
Well, the thing is that we don't have a specific goal. That's the main challenge that the cultural sector has when embrace the 2030 agenda. A lot of talk and discussion about this has been going on for years. I'm sure in the post 2030 agenda is going to be a goal. A lot of several main organizations are working on that, and we can talk about that at the end of our conversation. But mainly cultural agents are already working with the SDGs or aligned to the values of the 2030 agenda. But the main challenge remains how to make that visible. And it has to do with showing the impact that our work has in the 2030 agenda and the SDGs. And that has to do with measure and with targets and indicators, things that the cultural agents are not very familiar with. We are trying, for example, in SDS in Spain, to work that challenge by working with different groups of cultural agents and institutions throughout the country to try to set a basic format of presenting the impact of culture in the 2030 agenda, and information that can be used by local and regional and national governments to include that contribution of culture in the reports that are presented in the United Nations, for example. There are some countries that are already reporting in the cultural contribution of the SDGs, but there are few, and there's a lot of them that are not doing anything about culture or not presenting the work of culture. So this should be a work that we should do together with the local, regional, and national governments of our countries.
So that's also our part of the responsibility here, to flag this and to point this out to our governments, and not only to the cultural ministries, but also to other parts of the government, to make it actually visible and look into what we are already doing. I would like to open the floor in this first part to our participants who might have questions on this first basic part. What are these SDGs about? Which ones are relevant for us? And I would like to ask Flora if you see some questions.
So we don't have any questions in the chat, but if anyone wants to react, now is the moment. You can raise your hand virtually.
Exactly.
Or turn on your mic.
And ask your question if you have one to Lucía. Something is unclear or you would like to. I see no questions. Happy to be here. Happy to have you with us. So, if there are no questions, there is one.
One came in.
Yeah.
Two. Okay. So the first one: how local, regional, and national governing bodies inform about the new standards?
What do you mean about the new standards, Maria?
Your mic is not on.
You're mute.
Here we are. Yes. Yes. So, sorry, we're two persons from the same festival. I just came in. I was invited at the last moment, so I'm not Maria. I'm Karin. I'm the artistic director of Summer Music Lundsberg. And I mean, about the new standards, I mean the agenda. How are those local, regional and national governments informed about these standards? It's the first time that I see them. And I've been in festival work and cultural work for a long time. So, you know, where are the where are the links to these important new standards?
Yeah, well, if I understand your question well, the 2030 agenda set a roadmap to inform and report about the progress of each country, not only the public administration, but all the stakeholders that conform the country, for example, companies, cultural sector, educational sector, and industry, everything. So they took that information, they request that information to all the sectors, locally, regionally, and nationally, and they took that information, processed that information, and elaborate what is called voluntary national or voluntary local review. It is a review that you can present, and it is voluntary, although you have to present to the United Nations as a country at least 2 times in these 15 years. So they present the report at the United Nations in July normally, and in the high political forum, which is in July every year. So they present that report on how their countries are doing in the SDGs. But what we are seeing is, because it's not there's not a goal in culture, there's not a cultural goal within the SDGs. Only few countries or few cities present something about culture, because it's really hard to present something that quote cannot be measured, or it's not being measured with the official targets and the official indicators. So one of the solution can be to work on some format of report between culture and public administration that can be easy to fill for the cultural sector, and can be easy to process for the public administration. So cultural's contribution to the 2030 agenda can be visible at the United Nations and the National Progress Report and so on. So there is a way of presenting the results, although culture has to figure out how we are going to do that. I'm sorry, yeah.
Yes, so you know, out in the peripheral part of all this, where you run a festival, there are certain numbers around. I mean, we know how many people attend, we know how many people attend live, how many people attend live stream, and so on. So we can report something with numbers. But we do that usually just to ask for more money for our next festival. And from there on, I think there's no real bond to the next level, so to speak. So it's a question of communication between levels, really, isn't it?
Yeah, of course. That's why we are trying to do this job and trying to establish working group, mixed working group, multi-stakeholders, meetings, public administration, universities, and cultural sector to really agree on how is going to be the way culture is going to report and be present in this voluntary local or national review.
Okay. So last question, how can we out in the periphery be of help in this? I mean, now that we have seen what you have, what you're doing and all these possible measurements that there are, how can we out from periphery, you know, grassroots work going upwards instead of your work going from up to down, so to speak? How can we mention this? Can we start working with these standards when we report?
I think that's going to be the second part of the conversation.
Right, okay.
So I will wait for that, and then
yes.
because there is so many things you can start doing it before reporting. Reporting should be once you have aligned your work with the SDGs, and you have measured and evaluate your impact, and then you are ready to make that visible to the rest of the Thank you, Maria.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we have, I think, as far as I see, another question from Sarah Jane.
Actually, have a few more.
Yes, there are 2 more questions. The SDG, to me, have always seemed beyond aspirational in the time allowed. Was this a conscious decision in the setting of this agenda?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sarah. All the United Nations agenda has this, as you say, this aspirational way of writing, no? This writing that is like, we the countries hope and will. That's like the narrative of the UN. Of course, it is aspirational, but it's based. The good thing about the 2030 agenda is that it is based on measurement, which is very important. They have set targets and indicators, so now we can adapt that targets and indicators to our specific context, and we can start working on it. So it is aspirational, but at the same time, it is based in things very realistic. The process of the commitment of the 2030 agenda started in 2012, more or less, with an international set of working groups from different stakeholders, from religious groups to local associations from all over the world. So that's the main difference between the others agenda and the 2030 agenda. It wasn't something designed and made by the countries. It was something down to up. It was something that takes a lot of discussions, a lot of negotiations. That's why it's a weird number, 17. It's not 10, it's not 15, it's like 17. So it took a lot of effort to have this agenda, to have the 193 countries agreed. So you are going to find some things that looks aspirational, but other things are very, very realistic and based on the real problems that the SDGs are trying to solve.
Okay, I would propose that we move to the second part. We have to be a bit mindful about timing here. I see that there are more questions to come into the chat, and I would like to ask Flora to keep an eye on them and note them down for our discussion that we can then have later. Maybe some of the questions will even be answered in the second part and in the third part that we are discussing, and those who remain we can then pick up a bit later. And I would like to move forward now to really get practical. And I think that can be good insights for cultural organization, how to start to practically work with these SDGs. This is what is the second part about. And I would like to ask you, Lucía, now that we have a first basic view, if I work for a cultural organization, where do I start? What would be the first steps as an individual organization to how to start working and interconnecting with these goals?
Okay.
Your advice.
For that, I'm going to share something that I think it's going to be helpful for all of us. So we have, after our experience working with the cultural agents, we have set up like these 7, it could be more, it could be 9, but like the basic essential 7 steps to integrate the SDGs in a cultural organization, in your professional practice, if you're an independent cultural agent. So, and the first step should be commitment and will, and mainly from the management team that will be desirable, because the integration of the 2030 agenda, it's going to require some transformations in the work you have been doing, some change, I will say, change of mindset, some rethinking things and trying to do things differently, and taking examples from other disciplines that has not necessarily has to do with culture. So commitment and will be the first step. Once this is done, the next step that I was mentioning before is that this diagnosis, to knowing where am I as a cultural institution, what is the work I'm doing, and how can be linked to the SDGs. And once I have this diagnosis, that can be one piece of paper or can be a huge report. It depends on the nature of your institution or your project. It is important to take time to do the alignment with the SDGs. That means going through all of them, looking at the targets, getting to know more about them, and then trying to analyze what is our mission and vision, and what are the SDGs that are more identifying my project. I was saying before, festivals work a lot with the environmental approach, but maybe you're a festival that it's very commitment with gender equality, so you're gonna work more SDG 5, and so on. Once you have the alignment, I want to work this set of SDGs. It is important to set a series of objectives and action in short, mid, and long term. The integration of the 2030 agenda in our institution or in our project, it's going to be a long-term process. It's not going to happen in like 6 months. It's not going to happen in 1 year. You have to have this long-term strategic vision, but you have to start now. So you have to have these 3 parts: short, mid, and long-term objectives and specific actions. And then it is very important to evaluate, as Maria was saying, and a lot of people were asking in the chat. I need to evaluate my work. We have been working, for example, with the cultural sector of the Canary Island in helping them to have some cultural targets and indicators where culture can be measured. It is hard to measure culture because there's some parts that are intangible, like, I don't know, social cohesion or happiness, or you go to a festival and the intense experience that you have, how can you measure that? So it should be, the evaluation should be a mix between quantitative and qualitative data. So, but evaluation is very important, because with the evaluation, you can communicate your outputs, and you can be an experience for others, an inspirational experience for others, and you can communicate your work, and your work can be replicated, because the 2030 agenda is about that. It's about partnerships. It's about learning from others. It's not about competition. It's not about I'm doing this better than you. It's about sharing. How are you doing things, and how can you replicate other things that you are seeing, and as a good practices. So having these 7 steps, everyone can start working with the SDGs, knowing that it is important to have training, it is important to have commitment and will. And if you are a big, medium-sized, big-size organization, you should have a working group who leads the project. That's important also. So yeah, I will say that.
Yeah, and maybe we can also mention, Lucía, there is quite a good tool that has been developed by Goethe.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yes,
thank you.
We maybe can put it in the chat.
Yeah. I'm gonna show it I'm gonna show you also the tool that Silke is mentioning. Okay, it's here. It's called the SDG Impact Assessment Tool. You have to register to use it, but it's free. And then well, it's very easy. It works for every sector. And the main use of this tool is to align your practice with the SDGs. So at the end of all the process, which is like you have to fill some fields, and it is an easy process. You end up with something like this chart, where I don't know if you can see it, or it's very small, like this. So you end up with this chart, where you can see if you have a direct positive result in a specific SDGs. If you have an indirect positive impact, I'm sorry, it's impact, no impact, or negative, indirect or direct negative impact in the SDGs. So I highly recommend to use this tool just to do this exercise. So it is very useful to have that diagnosis that we were talking, and also to have general overview of your work linked to the SDGs.
Mm-hmm. And I think it can be a very practical tool, and at the same time, yes, to be aware, you have to be aware that it's a self-assessment tool. So organizations have to be honest on in which way they are working on these specific goals and what their impact is. But it can be a good start when you look into it in your own organization, or maybe with an expert that you are that you can have an exchange on this impact and on the start of your work. I have a lot of other questions, but as time is flying, maybe I would leave it to the participants to ask one or two questions in this part.
We just received one from Randall. A simple challenges in our sector is gender equality, a topic that Pearle has worked on extensively. Does our institution still have a gender pay gap? If so, then we need to address the topic to reach the SDG goal. Or an intervention. Then
gender pay gap, is that something that has to be addressed within the SDGs? Very concrete question on the impact we have.
But I think that question is for you, Silke, or because
Randy, I understood
it's not really a question.
It's not really a question.
It's really a question.
Sorry.
Say, it's so difficult in the cultural area to say what can we do for example, peace. And of course, I think a festival is probably helping at that, because it's getting people together, and the more people we get together in a live situation, the more they understand each other. But that's a very sort of a fuzzy type of area. But a very simple thing, and that's a problem still in Germany, is the gender pay gap. That's one of the SDGs, is to have gender equality. And as long as we still allow that to happen, then we're not reaching that goal. And that's a fairly simple goal, because we simply have to say if a woman or a non-binary or a man are doing the same work, they all get the same pay. It's, that's something that is fairly achievable within the cultural sector. And like I said, Pearle has done some excellent work on that, looking and that's what I'm saying, because sometimes there are things that are fairly easy, say, this is not fair, this is not right. We can change that. And a lot of the goals are a lot more difficult, though. I would also say in the area of sustainability, ecological sustainability, and we're talking about one of the SDGs about life on Earth, or in other words, biodiversity. Of course, if I have a green, field festival or something, I can take that in consideration. Is there anything here that might be excessive on the environment, or maybe we are doing something that's even good for the environment itself because we're providing, you know, in before we even start, making sure that we're not going to upset anything. So I know these things are very, when you look at them, I mean, that's why I put the thing in about the conventional weapons. I mean, if you're looking at it, peace, how are we going to attain peace? Of course, that's a job for the cultural sector, but it's nothing we're going to be able to change by doing something administrative, right? Okay, that's not easy. But there are some things that we can do administrative, like doing an environmental sustainability check before we do a Greenfield Festival or those types of things. I think that's where we need to focus on, is on the things that we can do without a lot of work.
I completely agree, Randall, and also that has to do with being convinced of the role of culture in sustainable development. What is our role? I mean, we are not governments, we are not industry, we are not the ones who has the most huge carbon footprint in the in the sector, you know, things about plane or no. So we should and we must adopt these measures like carbon footprint and everything about environment and gender equality, because it also in our context create that space that only cultural and education can create, spaces to reflect, to discuss about the major things that really matter to all of us as a species. So, and I believe the perfect framework is culture in any way. It could be a film, it could be a festival, it could be a museum, it could be an exhibition, it could be the work of an artist, but it really creates the atmosphere to reflect. And then after the reflection comes the action. So yeah, we are that should be our role.
And as you said, Lucía, so it's not always easy to measure it impacts, because the goal for culture is not there. And I already see that there's a question in the chat about the SDGs after 2030, which is our third part. We would briefly at least like to discuss, to have a bit of an outlook, because well, you said it's difficult to measure, and the question is, what is needed then for culture in the future? How can we make sure that our sectors are fully recognized within this framework and are maybe better measurable as well, or more adapted, maybe something that is more adapted to our sector to make them visible? So what are the ideas here?
Well, first, I would like to step back and say that one of the things that the SDG Summit and last September, that the main meeting to evaluate the SDG that took place in September in United Nations, and also the report that my network SDSN does every year, the thing shown is that the SDGs are far to be accomplished. I mean, we are very far to have the 2030 agenda accomplished. That means that the post-2030 agenda is going to be based on the SDGs, not only because they are already set up and defined with a lot of shadows also, but it's the roadmap that we have and that we all agree to have, but because the sustainable development, it's really is the only way to ensure a quality life for present and future generation, for human and non-human beings for the next years. So we really need to have this roadmap. In the post-2030 agenda, some SDGs will be more defined, others will be falling, disappearing for the agenda, but I'm sure culture is going to have a goal, because there is a strong campaign, and I'm going to show you that, so you can have also the link here. It's called Cultural Goal, and It is supported by different institutions, ICOMOS, Cultural Action Europe, local governments, United Local Governments. So it is a very well and thoughtful work. I strongly recommend you to read this report. You can also look for the webpage, and you can sign the manifesto, and you can be part of the action to really be part of this desire of having a cultural goal. They are raising their voice in the main international forums as UNESCO, Mondiacul last September, or United Nations. It's very well explained why we need a cultural goal. They are also working in the cultural goals with targets and indicators, so it can be integrated in the new 2030 agenda. So this being said, what can we do from now to 2030? And I think we can, we are already working in the SDGs. If we are not, we can start integrating the SDGs in the DNA of our work and our institution. But the other thing I will say is to start thinking about how to make visible the impact that we have in the SDGs. And that means that we have to rethink the way we communicate our work, the way we evaluate our work, and we need to learn from other fields and on how to evaluate and how to measure and how to, because the targets and the indicators of the SDGs are thought for the countries, are designed on a national level, but a lot of cities and regions and companies have localized the SDGs. That means they have brought the SDGs into their specific context and have adapted the targets and the indicators. That is the work we are doing with the Canary Island cultural sector. We are trying to land the SDGs into their specific context so they can align with these targets and these indicators and start to measure. There's some things that, like this emotional experience, that we are not going to be able to measure, because culture is special and have that special thing, no? But we are going to, but we have to make sure that part is also visible in the contribution of the SDGs, because it has to do with a spiritual and emotional part that is also very important. It has to do with these things that we were talking with Randall, that creating these spaces where the debates are taking place.
Maybe just to pick up the chat, I see a few questions here, and one very concrete one is whether this topic and whether your network, Lucía, already starts working on the post-2030 agenda in the context of the COP28, so the big climate change conference that is starting very soon. Is that already a topic that will be included there? Will you be present with your network, making already the case for culture there?
Well, we are trying to include the cultural discussion in the international forums, and right now in SDSN Spain is the only one who is working with culture for more than, we have been starting working with culture in 2017, but we are now training our colleagues in other networks to integrate culture. So we are going to have a delegate in COP, but we are not sure if culture is going to be integrated in SDSN, but it has been integrated in other COPs as a discussion, as a debate. It has been last year, and COP25 in Madrid also had a cultural dialogue. So it has been appearing the cultural conversation in many COPs.
Mm-hmm. I see that time is running out for our webinar, so I would like to, I know that there are questions left, and I hope we'll find the opportunity to continue our conversation with Lucía after this webinar, and maybe we can at least try to wrap up a little bit the talks that we had. And I think there was a lot of insight, new information coming in, maybe doubts, how can we start to work with these goals. I don't know if Peter Florence, you would like to take the words for a few minutes, just to wrap up a bit what we have heard.
I'd love to. Thank you, Silke, and thank you, Lucía, for a typically brilliant and fascinating introduction. So several things occur, and I want to ask a couple of questions, I think, of all of us, as well as of you. The first is that the Sustainable Development Goals look like an admirable and utopian ideal of how to build civilized society for state-level governance. So our questions as arts producers and festivals seem to be, and forgive me if these sound cynical, but firstly, how do we apply your impact assessment tool to give us a snapshot diagnosis of where we are? And if we have that, how can we use that data in order to persuade public funding that we are helping them achieve their goals? On a more personal level, I guess, we want to perhaps map your impact assessment tool over the governance of our own organizations, because as small and medium scale businesses, we should perhaps be absolutely focused on doing the right thing in those ways, which are conversations that board members rarely have, because so often we're just talking about funding. It would be interesting to just revisit our own internal governance in terms of that global governance. But the other thing which seems to me to be how we can be of value to the rest of the world or the rest of society, you yourself brilliantly articulated about first arts, the culture idea being about the creation of happiness, the exploration of spirituality, and how individuals get to live. So do those apply to what we do? Well, maybe EFA could have a really useful role in finding out. Maybe we could take 10 festivals, apply your impact assessment tool, and give you a snapshot of where we all are and what we might do. But I'm completely, I have to say, with Randall on this. Maybe we should go for where the big wins are. Surely in the cultural sector, we have an incredible opportunity to push for gender equality as a norm and an absolute. Maybe we could help highlight the way that works. And maybe we could look at all the other things that we don't naturally lean towards and say, if we did, maybe we'd increase our audiences, maybe we'd increase our relevance, maybe we'd increase all those happiness and spirituality ideas that you've kicked in yourself. It seems like the beginning of a much bigger conversation, but perhaps at the next EFA conference, we could have had some hard research and metrics done to give you an idea of where we are and what you think we might be able to do to help everybody and to help ourselves.
Yeah, completely. I mean, well, the SDG impact assessment tool is just a tool to give you an impression of where you are and what you are doing that can be linked to the SDGs. I won't take it like the Bible. So it's just to give you a general overview, but each institution has to do that their own process and their own way. I will say don't get crazy with the measurement and things. It's easy to start with objectives and specific action and the alignment with the SDGs and the commitment and will, if you really want to integrate the SDGs in your professional practice. And I also believe that our experience mentoring cultural institution or cultural festivals is that once you have created the narrative that align your work with the SDGs. At least in Spain, and also, for example, the new Bauhaus are really increasing their funds in cultural institutions that are linked with the SDGs. The new European Bauhaus, everything is about sustainability and innovation, and although it's hard to apply to the new Bauhaus, but I mean the funds are there, and the idea is that every cultural institution will work in innovation and in SDGs. That's the idea of that's the idea for the funds in the new Bauhaus. And in Spain also more and more local and regional governments are giving funds to cultural institutions that have their work aligned with the SDGs. But the thing that I was not mentioning before, and I think it's very important, is the training, is the knowledge about the 2030 agenda. Because we don't have a cultural goal, the cultural sector has been disconnected from the 2030 agenda, of course, because there was nothing related, although we have some targets in some SDGs. Culture looks like a transversal axis, but sometimes transversal is nothing. It's like intangible, you know. So, but now more and more cultural agents are working in the 2030 agenda, but most of them yet don't have the training or are not aware of the opportunities that the SDGs can bring us. For example, connecting with different disciplines and partnerships with different partners, potential partners that you have never think about before, or new potential audiences, and so on. So that's about the funding and the tool.
Our webinar.
I'm sorry.
Sorry to interrupt you, Lucía. It's a very interesting thought and information that you are giving, and I think the training is key, and also related to this, of course, the funding and how to find the right funding for cultural organizations to become active and to look into measurements, because it's also a question of, you need the people to do this work and to do this work properly. But I would like to thank you, first of all, Lucía, so much for sharing your expertise with us, and we can hear that it is great expertise that you have in the field, and lots of information I think that cultural organizations can get. And you mentioned a report that you just published in Spanish. Maybe it is coming soon in English, so this is definitely then also another source that we can share with our networks to become more acquainted, or to start working with the Sustainable Development Goals. And for today, for now, I would like to thank you all for having joined us here. Stay tuned and stay with us in the work on the SDGs in the coming years, and in the to prepare also the post-2030 phase, and maybe very practically to look into one of the tools and just start working with these.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Peter and Audrey and Silke, everyone. I just put my email in case if someone wants to contact us. And thank you all.
Thank you so much. Have a good day. Bye-bye.